Welcome to the ADHD Women and Business Show. I'm Lana,
And I'm Becky.
and in true ADHD fashion, we are latecomers to the party. Both of us run successful businesses, and we're exploring how ADHD is probably our superpower. Now, we can't be the only ones on this journey, and you are very welcome to join us as we discover more about ADHD, women, and business. Now, remember, we are experts in our own experiences, not ADHD experts. I help women in business to implement the right tech at the right time, and Becky helps implement the sales process that works for you without any sleazy tactics. We don't have all the answers on ADHD, which is why we're sharing our thoughts and discoveries with you. So, today's episode is us chatting about the conversation that we've had with Charlotte Dover. And we've been looking at, well, maybe ADHD. Are we? What does that mean? And how do we know? So, Becky, what were your thoughts?
Oh, there was so much to talk about actually, but one of the things that I thought Charlotte put really well was that whole thing of we're all human beings, we all have similar experiences from time to time, but that it's the frequency and impact of those things that are, rather than somebody saying, well, doesn't everybody do that? Actually, when you have ADHD, certain things happen more often and with a
Mm.
greater impact. And her example was going upstairs to grab something. And, I've left soup on the pan, homemade soup boiling for an hour because I've gone into another room to get something and been distracted and gone and done something in that room. And I think it's a daily occurrence that I walk
Mm.
into a room and think, oh, yeah, I was in the middle of doing something in
Yeah.
that room. It is a daily occurrence, at least for me. So,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean that resonated with me
Mm,
so much. And I know in a previous episode we talked about this. And yes, there was a point in time where I actually thought, gosh, maybe I've got dementia, because the
yeah.
frequency of
Yes.
distraction. And not just that, but it wasn't just, going to get something. It was then, as Charlotte sort of mentioned, with her going upstairs, there's a box that needs to go up. Oh, the carpet needs hoovering. Oh, there's a scratch on the
Yeah.
on the stairs. It's not just one distraction, it is many. And it's almost like having to work through all of those and sorting them, but only to realize that you haven't actually attended to the thing that initially caused you to make the movements.
Yes. Yeah. No,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, I've often wondered whether to put those Apple tags to find things on my house
Oh,
keys,
yes. Okay.
simply because I can come in, even
Hmm.
if I know I've put them somewhere,
Yeah.
I forget. And then I get distracted and think I've put them somewhere else. And I can
Hmm.
spend at least 15, 20 minutes trying to locate them, get distracted with other things. And then an hour later thinking, actually, it was my keys I was looking for and I now need them.
Yeah.
you know, so it's kind of reassuring
Yeah.
that she was saying that, because yes,
So,
we are all human first, and these are things that do and can happen in our lives.
mm,
But it is, like you say, and like Charlotte said, that frequency
yeah.
and the kind of consistency of that happening that makes you think, oh, yes, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, I think I, yes, I have four or five places my keys are likely to be. Um, but yeah, I'm often wrong about the first place I look for them, put it that way. So yeah, it's like, oh God. And in fact, there was one memorable day when we had builders as well working in the house when I had to take we had a van at the time because we were doing a whole load of renovation work, and I had to take the van keys instead of my keys to a client. because I couldn't find my keys anywhere. They ended up in a pocket somewhere. But anyway, the van ran out of petrol on the way to the client. So then I had to call the builders, who were at least helpful about trying to get me back on. Oh, it was like, oh my goodness, the knock-on effect of leaving my keys in a pocket. Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
I also loved what Charlotte said actually about that idea of the thought bubbles that then pop. And I just thought, I've heard, people talk about thought bubbles as the little sort of like mouthy thing, and that's the sort of thing that I thought first of all, the speech bubble, but actually that thought bubble where it pops. And she's so right. I have absolute clarity and it's there, and then I start to verbalize it and it's gone, and I'm like, can't grab it anymore. And I thought, what a brilliant visual for that happening. I don't know. I don't know whether it happens to you, whether you have those sort of things where you then just can't catch your thoughts again.
Yes, coming back to those thought bubbles. I mean, I kind of hadn't really thought of them in that way, but when she was describing it like that, it's like, yes, because I know in my head what I'm wanting to do, what I'm wanting to say, what the idea is, how I can kind of take that forward. But the moment I have to verbalize it, it's like it comes out almost too winding, convoluted, and rambly. And I can see the other person's eyes glazing over, and I'm really excited because I'm thinking, oh, this is really exciting.
This
And
fully formed concept in your head, isn't it?
Just like,
it doesn't come out.
Just get it into 3 sentences with full stops in between, and perhaps list. And that's been really interesting to hear, because that's already got me thinking that, okay, how do I translate the thinking in my head down? And I do like writing, so maybe the way forward for that is get it all out of your head, write it down, and almost then go back and edit it so that you can come out with your kind of very clear points, thoughts, or observations to help the other person understand that you are trying to communicate in the same language as them.
And that's lovely if you've got time to do that, isn't it? But I know in meetings when I was in corporate, I would have this fully formed concept in my head, but then actually coming out with it and it sort of dissipating almost. Sometimes you don't have the time to process it that way, do you? Unfortunately. And I also find that as a business analyst, I was contracting for a number of years as a business analyst, where I'd go in and help people with their processes and procedures. And again, seeing it in my head was amazing. And actually with my current clients, they're relatively simple processes, so I can normally document those quite well, very well actually. But when it was multi actors, multi departments, multi disciplines and stuff, actually getting it from my understanding in my head onto paper for other people, I did it, and I did it well, and it was the most painful step for me, was getting out of my head onto paper in a way that other people could read it. And I hadn't really thought about that as being an ADHD trait, but clearly it is. So
I liked how she was talking about this sort of bank of proof. When we were talking about rejection sensitivity, dysmorphia, and the reality of running a business is that there are going to be times where clients don't want to work with you for all sorts of reasons. So having that kind of bank of proof to remind you that you are good at what you do, you
Yeah.
have got a good offer, you do believe in it, you are more than capable of delivering
Yeah.
it, and sort of separating that out to, it's to do with client might not be the right time. It might not be a no, it might just be a later or a give me a bit more space.
Yeah.
It could be I need more information before I can reach decision. And that's all about the
Yeah.
business process as
Yes.
opposed to it being
Yes.
a
A personal
personal.
rejection. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It was lovely hearing both you and Charlotte's thoughts on that, actually, because clearly, being in sales, I work with my clients on that a lot, and I didn't want to jump in and talk about what I normally talk about with my clients, because it was like actually really useful to get your takes on it as well. And I think not taking it personally is around, as you say, understanding it's a business process and understanding your numbers.
Mm,
Because for some people, it's out of every 2 conversations they have, they will get a client.
mm,
And for some people, it's out of every 100 conversations they have, they'll get a client. But if you can work on knowing
mm,
your number, and it's unique to all of us. Sometimes they improve as we get better at those conversations. But actually, if you know your number, you're collecting the no's, because
mm.
brilliant, another no, I'm
Yes,
another
closer
no
to a
closer
yes.
to yes. And it's
Yeah.
so lovely when that happens and you get it. I know when I was in telesales and I'd be making 100 dials a day, literally like dials as well, old fashioned phones. But it would be, you just have to keep going, because you knew for every no, you were one closer to the yes. And it was
Mm,
really consistent. It got to a point where I could tell you exactly what my numbers were,
yeah.
and how often I'd get a yes and how many yeses according to how many calls I made. So yeah, that was really a really good grounding for
Mm,
me to understand that a no wasn't personal.
mm,
Although when I started my consulting business, I was
mhm,
fine with no's. But when I started heart to heart sales, I still went through that whole pain of
mm,
feeling it was personal, because
mm,
clearly the coaching I do is more connected. So it
mm.
is around values and everything else. And so it felt more personal. So I still had to go through that learning curve again for myself, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think honestly, I don't know that that we always successfully achieve that detachment.
Yeah.
I mean, I loved we talked about labels, whether they were good, not good. And we talked about the context of whether ADHD is, more in the medicalizing,
Yeah.
pathologizing. What I really liked about what Charlotte was sort of sharing was actually labels can work for you as well.
Yeah.
One, in the kind of if you choose to go down the formal diagnosis route in order to access quite
Yes.
highly regulated medication, but also labels can help you detach from the personal experience of
Yeah. Yeah.
rejection sensitivity disorder, because you're labeling it as a thing, as it, and you're not
Yeah.
labeling yourself. And that's a
Yes.
huge distinction, which was really, really helpful. Um,
Mm.
because I do feel that in running a business, there are so many setbacks. There are, and it's kind of interesting over the last 10 years where it's moved from this rah, 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 succeed, succeed, succeed against all odds
Mm.
to fail, 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 fail fast, fail forward, because you
Yeah.
get more grounding and
Yes.
understanding of the business roller coaster, really.
Yeah.
And to recognize that, therefore, detaching yourself from the personal experience, recognizing this label is this. So therefore, I don't have to get so emotionally invested.
Yeah.
It is this. Therefore, this is a natural part of running a business. I feel it's a huge step forward then in being able to manage whether you have ADHD or not, but there's still a business
Yes.
up and down that happens.
Yeah.
So that was super helpful.
Well, I'm wondering whether I can apply it to, I was chatting to a client earlier, and I still feel this, the fear of failure. Sometimes I'd rather not start something in case I fail, which is completely contradictory, because of course I'm going to fail if I don't start it. And I was chatting to a client about exactly the same thing that she was going through this morning, and I'm just, we were talking about that the only way she will succeed at doing it is to take action. And I wonder if I can start labeling it in myself as, okay, that's just my fear of failure. That's fine. Thank you. Acknowledging that and moving forwards, rather than, that gut, like, oh, I don't want to start something. So that's an interesting concept that I'll think about a bit, actually, and how I can apply that to other things. Because like we said, I've done it with the RSD, so perhaps I can do it with other things as well. One of the things you mentioned just now, actually, was this whole idea of the evidence that we're good at stuff as well. One of the tricks that I use for myself, and I teach my clients as well, is if you can print out your testimonials and have them in a little book, that when you occasionally have those wobble, or often have those wobbles, to actually be able to flick through them quickly and have them in front of you readily available is a lovely way of boosting your morale, particularly before a call where you're hoping somebody's going to buy from you, actually, because it just lifts your level. You go in as queen instead of as a
I think that's such a good tip. So yes, I do think that it's almost like a swipe file, isn't it? Just
yes.
reaffirming your capabilities, your successes. That and I think they're also good to look at perhaps when you're having a bit of a low day or a lull, that you can go back and think, actually, I did a really cracking job on that, and I worked really well with that, and and almost sort of using it as a springboard to figure out, okay, I did it really well there. What propels me to the next bit? So definitely, I think that's a great idea.
Cool.
Yeah, no, just something else that struck me when Charlotte was saying, when we're talking about this sort of rejection, fearing putting a post up, social media post. So it kind of got me thinking, what are the marketing techniques where, and there are many, we know that there are many, but what works best for one's own personal character and personality. But equally, sometimes I think you have to push yourself out of that little comfort zone in order to be seen. I know that there have been more times than I would like to remember where I have gone to put out a social media post, and at the point of pressing the post button thought, oh no, not quite comfortable, not quite ready. And the reality is, most of the people who follow you are going to see your post. I think it's 3% of the people on your thing. It's a tiny amount. And a lot of women, whether they have ADHD, maybe have ADHD or do not have ADHD, do have a fear of promoting themselves and marketing themselves. So even that one little post is not going to get a huge amount of traction, realistically, when you look at all the algorithms and everything else. So you have to market yourself more. And I know that can feel a huge challenge, because in your head, or in one's head, it's like, oh, but I've already put a post out today. Gosh, I might be seen as pushy. I might be seen as, annoying. I might be seen as this. And the reality is, there is so much bandwidth within social media to post, more frequently, because your posts get seen by so few. Unless you have huge audiences, your post gets
Yeah.
lost in the speed of the scroll.
Well, and even if somebody does see it and they think, oh, that sounds interesting, but then they get distracted or go and do something else. And then, 3 days later, they think they don't think about it. They've got to see it again to
Yeah.
go, oh, yeah, that looked interesting. I was going to check whether I'm available that date to go do it. So I do
Mm,
agree with you. I have to say, the very first time I posted on Instagram, I felt sick, totally sick. Um, and I was part of a group where we were all doing it for the first time. So we
mm,
had that little bit of helpful um,
mm,
support within the group, but I just felt dreadful. And yet, you are right, you do have to understand why it's important to do what you're doing, I think, because then it's
mm,
easier to take that action that
mm,
takes you out of your comfort zone. But I don't mean at that point that it's huge volume necessarily. I think for people, for
mm,
instance, my Instagram at the moment is turned off.
mm,
I've actually decided just to come away from Instagram for a while. So it's turned off. But since that very first post 3 or 4 years ago, I've done lives, I've
mm,
reels, I've done silly things and then decided they're not really for me, and gone on to
mm,
sort of more normal businessy stuff. Um, but I've just learned that it's a tool, and I've
mm,
chosen right now to come off that tool, but I may go back.
mm,
Um, but it's just a tool, and it's not about me. It's about whether I'm helping the people reading it and whether I'm helping them understand, once they following me because they like me and they want more of my content, am I then giving them the avenue to work with me?
yeah.
Because whether it's verbally or whether it's on social media, actually, the worst thing we can do with someone is say, oh yeah, well, just email me if you want to go ahead. It's like, it doesn't work. You need to
Mm,
have that confidence of, tell you what, if you want to go ahead, press this
mm,
button, do
mm,
this, and then we'll get to work with each other. It feels
yeah.
so much safer for them to
Mm,
make the decision to say yes.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, there were so many nuggets in that
Yes.
conversation. I really enjoyed that.
Mm. I,
Um,
just one other thing, sorry, just thinking
mm,
about, I did want to mention was that self-trust,
mm,
self-belief, self-trust, trusting ourselves is so important. But
yeah.
that statistic that even within, and Charlotte didn't say this bit, but even within what one might call a normal household,
Mm,
that child will have been corrected 20,000 times more than a neurotypical child.
mm,
Is
yeah.
Doesn't it explain so much? I mean, it could.
Yeah.
It's like, oh
Yeah.
my goodness, and then put in,
Mm,
if you've come from a background like me where my dad was violent, shouty, stepdad
mm,
was alcoholic, all of that
mm,
stuff that causes even more. You think, oh
yeah.
my goodness me,
Mm.
oh, that poor little girl, she needs a hug
Yeah,
for sure.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And without wanting to diminish that and the those experiences, there's all there what I kind of come away with that is the resilience, for a
Yes.
child to have gone through
Yes.
that extra, and I'm, air
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
quotes,
Yeah.
correction,
Yes.
over and over again,
Yeah.
more so than a neurotypical child, and yet has still found their inner resilience to
Yeah.
keep going and to keep exploring and to find their way, is testament to their their ability to
Yeah,
dig deep and
yeah,
just keep going.
yeah. Their core strength is there, isn't
Absolutely.
it? When you've dealt with that.
Yeah.
But it did explain some of those reasons why we find maybe our feelings or our likes and
Mm.
dislikes even
Yeah.
harder to access.
Mm.
And whether that's through because we've been masking or because we've been told we shouldn't be doing certain things or shouldn't like certain things,
Yeah.
um, that this exploration now is around what do we really like, what can we
Mm.
really do, what we really capable of, because we're
Mm.
capable of so much.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think looking at in the past, we've talked about energy management.
Yeah,
Um, and it's almost how much energy do you have to retain all of those conditionings that we've been
I know.
experienced, and how much, when Charlotte also talked, she touched on very briefly about, being able to sort of sit in joy, is how I interpreted it. And that might also relate to something I was reading this morning about how to almost construct your business in a way that is joyful,
Yeah.
that you are walking towards joy and away from pain, but also recognizing that there will be challenges
Yes.
within the business process, some of which you won't like. But if your overarching joy is being an entrepreneur, being in business,
Yeah.
then they are kind of worthwhile challenges, which means that you're feeding your energy rather than your energy depleting because you're stuck in those kind of
Yeah.
things that
Yeah.
just do not enable you to kind of grow and experience in a joyful way.
And I I think there's an element of fear that drives some of those feelings, isn't it? That fear of getting things wrong, that
Yeah.
again is from those childhood experiences and corrections,
Mm.
um, that mean that we think everything should go perfectly in our business if we are to be good at what we do.
Mm.
And in fact, being good at what we do isn't always the same, well, isn't the same as being good at business.
Yeah.
And we have to learn how to run our businesses in a way that suits us and our energy and our abilities, and also understand that there will always be challenges in
Mm.
running a business. And it's how you respond to
Yeah.
those challenges that is the thing that you can learn to get better at
Mm.
rather than not having challenges in the first place. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, running a business, there is no place to hide. There isn't.
No.
So, and, it was quite an eye opener when Charlotte was saying how many people who are likely to have ADHD are most likely to be entrepreneurs themselves
Yes.
because they don't fit the current work
Mm.
environment in the way that it's been set up. So if that's the case, then the skill set is, fail fast, fail forward, know that your business is going to go through challenges,
Yeah.
know and trust yourself. So there's all those elements
Yeah.
that is so important so that you can kind of ride the wave of business
Mm.
rather than be in a drowning in a lifeboat scenario.
Yes. Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I know I still struggle with failure,
Mm.
failing forwards, and that whole thing of not starting in case I fail. I still am in, there's a little part of me that still does that. So I
Mm.
need to work on that one for sure.
Oh, I
So
think me too, me too. And if you are listening to us, if you're watching us, Let us know, where have you failed? How have you
Yeah.
failed forward? What did you kind of learn from that? Have you got any tips and advice that you can
Mm,
give the listeners, the community on the show? Because it's a really important aspect of running a business. And I think sometimes as well, it can feel very isolating running your business on your own. So having and knowing that we all fail. Some of us fell backwards too many times to mention. However, it does work itself out. And coming
yeah.
back to what Charlotte was saying and what you've also raised, Becky, that self-trust and having that inner belief of knowing. So do let us know your thoughts and
Mm,
questions. Because this is a really big topic, and we've been so lucky that Charlotte went quite deep into that conversation with us. So it's definitely one to return to, I feel. I don't know about you, Becky, but I think there was
absolutely.
so much there, wasn't there?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, thank you so much for coming along on our journey of discovery and our curiosity, our quest to have and know more knowledge about ADHD and running our businesses. We'd love it if you could give us a follow, and also do drop your questions and your fail forward examples in. We'd love to hear from you.
We would.
Um, Finally, I guess really we've come to the end. So I was going to say it's goodbye from me,
And it's goodbye from her.
and you keep on being you, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.